I crested the hill above Birch Hollow Lake and stopped cold because where my A-frame used to sit was a scraped black rectangle, like someone took an eraser to my life and bragged about it. And there on the gravel was Lydia Crane, president of the Maple Ridge Shores HOA, holding up a sheet of paper like a magic trick and calling me a squatter on my own deed, telling me to take it up at the next meeting while smoke still hung low over the water. And right then, I knew two things. That order was a fake, and the next time she saw a judge, she wouldn't be waving paper, she'd be walking past deputies. My name is Logan Pike, 30 years on a ladder as a city firefighter. Army engineer before that. I build, I measure. I don't scare easy. And after my wife Emery died, I rebuilt my grandfather's A-frame into Harbor Haven, a place where Gold Star families could breathe without being told to move their garbage cans by 7 p.m., or else you know what I mean. And it wasn't fancy, just cedar and coffee and a dock that caught sunrise like a habit. The trouble started a year earlier at 6:04 a.m., which tells you who Lydia is. She knocked with the edge of a clipboard, taped a citation to my glass before I could get the deadbolt. Initial fine $500, and change for a dock that now exceeded Bylaw 8.3 by 14 inches. Doubles in 30 days, she said it like she was reading a parking meter. And when I asked to see the covenant I supposedly signed, she smiled that cold smile and said, authority is implied by benefit received. Which is HOA for we mow the entrance, so we own your life. And yeah, that happened. I pulled the 1961 plat. Ran my finger along the dark line where the HOA's future boundary ends, short of my parcel printed the survey. Made a binder thick enough to be a doorstop, carried it to a fluorescent board meeting where folding chairs squeaked and people nodded along to nothing. And when it was my turn, I laid out the map. The deed the dates explained that Harbor Haven predates Maple Ridge Shores, that I never signed their architectural covenant, and that if dock length was suddenly holy, they might peek at the cruise ship pier 2 houses down. But Lydia didn't look at the paper. She looked at the room and said soft and righteous, that some folks want the prestige of a lake community without responsibility, then dropped squatter like a stone in a quiet church. And the silence after that told me humiliation is a tool. If you've got a microphone and a gavel. I wrote a notarized objection clean and calm. Show me the clause or leave me alone. And what came back wasn't reason. It was a drumbeat of petty tickets. That would be funny if they didn't stick to your wallet 50 for unapproved shingles, even though I matched the old color 100 for unauthorized shoreline maintenance because I pulled reed grass off my steps. 75 for overnight parking because my neighbor's kid left his F-150 in my drive, while we swapped an alternator, all of it on thick paper, as if weight could make nonsense. True, then the certified envelope hit, a lien for $720, and anyone who's ever been liened knows the trick. They don't need to be right. They just need to cloud your title and dare you to burn $5,000 to uncloud it. That weekend I had to be gone. Promised months earlier to help with a veteran's ropes course. And when I rolled back in on Sunday afternoon, the air smelled wrong. Not a kitchen flashover. Not a wind-driven crown fire. A controlled demolition. Burn diesel and brush. The smell of an ending. Someone put on a calendar, and when I stepped out, the dock posts were snapped like molars. The chimney stuck up alone like a headstone. The ground raked flat so clean it made my skin crawl, and I picked through the soot and found a photo frame near where our couch used to be. Glass crazed but intact. Emery smiling like she did on the days she pretended not to cry after the chemo. And that picture put steel back in my knees. The county fire investigator, Bill, rolled up eyes glued to his clipboard. Like it was a shield, said the report, called it an authorized abatement by Maple Ridge Shores. And when I asked authorized by who, he didn't answer, which told the truth louder than anything. And that's the moment you decide what kind of man you are. Do you rebuild first and let the people who burned you control the story? Or do you clear the site without hammers with questions and tape? Because power either answers to paper or it answers to nothing at all. I parked a beat-up 20-foot trailer in the trees where the road couldn't see. It ran a generator, taped a hotspot to the window, turned the dinette into a whiteboard with 3 lines, jurisdiction money signatures, ringed the acreage with motion cameras, because you measure first or you get surprised. And the first surprise was a white sedan with a cheap light bar and HOA enforcement on the door, driven by a theater cop named Rick Barlow, who pounded my trailer at 10:13 p.m. and told me I had 24 hours to vacate HOA property. And I held my phone up to the glass so the camera could grab his face and the timestamp and said, "Rick, this is my deeded land. That light bar is plastic. Come back with a badge or a warrant, or both." And he slapped a neon tow sticker on my truck at dawn, because petty men love adhesive. So I photographed it and smiled. The next morning, Owen Price crossed my line, a retired federal prosecutor who grows tomatoes and minds his business until he doesn't read the lien letter. Slow with his thumb on the seal. Said, "You're not crazy, but they're counting on you to act like you are. Let me pull the filings, no fee." And he said it as casually as ordering a sandwich, which is how you know you've met a grown-up. Then I called Tank, Marcus Delgado, a contract savant who left the Pentagon for an RV shop where he can take things apart in peace. Told him the old developer's name, the HOA's management company, a cluster of numbered LLCs buying houses from folks who suddenly couldn't sleep under paper, and he said, "Send me everything." Chewing like he hadn't taken a lunch break in a month. Last call was to a reporter named Talia Nguyen, who has a habit of ruining the week for small-town officials, who forget that public money is public. Told her a veterans retreat got burned over a fake bill, and she said, "Won you at 9. Which is how light gets in. Owen started pulling recorder documents like scarves, found 5 families forced out by the same sequence. Petty fines, lean legal pressure, until they sold to a numbered LLC called Shoreline Vista Partners. And you could smell the grift through the ink. And while Rick kept circling with his spotlight, Tank rang me 3 days later with a laugh that means he found a lever big enough to move a mountain. Said the entrances and clubhouse and boat ramp were never owned by Maple Ridge Shores. They were leased by the original developer through a separate company, North Shore Amenities LLC, which the state dissolved a decade back for not paying $620 in franchise tax. And if I paid the debt and reinstated the entity, I wouldn't just buy paper, I'd buy standing. In plain terms, I could become their landlord. I drove to the Capitol, slid 620 across the counter, filed the reinstatement. Listing me as managing members got a state seal, so ordinary it felt like a magic trick. And on the way home, I printed 4 stacks, the reinstatement, the old lease, a termination of HOA rights to operate on North Shore properties, and a 1-pager warning all HOA personnel and contractors. They were no longer authorized to patrol or enforce on those parcels, and that trespass would be prosecuted. And under the floodlight, at the entrance monument on the clubhouse door, on the bulletin board, above the lost kitten flyer, and finally, on Rick's driver window. While he idled past my drive, I taped them up, watched him read by flashlight, with his jaw working like he'd chewed aluminum. The HOA lawyer fired back with a letter that was all teeth, tortious interference, fraudulent malicious, and threats. Don't scare me. They focus me. So I photocopied the letter and taped it under my notice. Everywhere, then wrote in fat black marker. They burned my house, used an old county form for the lien. Now they threaten me for standing up if you've been bullied by this board. Meet me at Station 12 on Tuesday at 6 p.m. Bring your paper. And I expected 20 neighbors maybe, but the pancake room was packed. Veterans in caps. Widows. A retired lineman with hands like roots. A young couple with a stroller. And I laid my binder on a metal table and talked plain. No seasoning. And when I finished, Frank stood up in the back and said, Lydia fined him $200 because his mailbox wasn't the approved shade of black and gave him 30 days to fix it. And he's 83, latter days are over then. Marisol said. They liened her because her son parked his F-150 for 48 hours while on leave and called it commercial. A former board secretary said, Lydia changed minutes from denied to tabled and did what she wanted. A retired permit officer said my lien form was invalid county stock, and the demolition signature wasn't the clerk's. It was all daylight crime. And when someone yelled class action, the room hummed like a line in a storm. And I said, pick your ground, courts are a battlefield. But next week's HOA meeting is ground. We can take today. We will not shout, we will vote. And the chant that rose, vote them out, felt like gravity. The clubhouse was wall to wall. Lydia came in late with a lawyer and a smile you use when you're not sure your jacket is on. I banged a gavel that sounded like a toy, and when open comment hit, I set 3 sheets in front of her. North Shore reinstatement with me as managing member the original lease of common areas. The termination notice effective 11:52 p.m. last night. And she said, illegal. I will sue you. I will sue everyone in this room. Breathing hard, like the floor tilted. And I didn't raise my voice. I laid down one more page. A complaint to the state attorney general signed by 84 homeowners for fraud, racketeering, malicious destruction, and hands rose like a tide when someone motioned to remove the board. The trespass case they filed on me was already dropped by the time we hit court. Even the county prosecutor can read a plat. So the courtroom wasn't for me anymore, and Owen went brick by brick, called the county clerk, who testified the demolition order was forged. Non-existent case number. Wrong, seal model, not her signature. Called a former board member who said Lydia altered minutes and pushed invoices, called the treasurer, Ann, who admitted checks for landscaping at way over market. Went to a company owned by Lydia's brother. And finally, he set 2 pages in front of Lydia and asked if the first signature authorizing a $48,900 payment to Titan Demolition was hers, and if the second signature at the bottom of the abatement order presented to the sheriff was hers, and the signatures matched, like noon to noon, and the judge didn't need theater. One gavel crack officer escort misses, craned to my chambers, and the deputies walked her past my table without cuffs, while she looked at me for a half-second. And what I saw wasn't anger, it was that elevator drop. When you realize the ground under you was air. So that's where I cut. Tight, right when power changes hands, because that's the honest ending. But maybe it isn't clean for you. Maybe you're stuck on the part where I paid $620 to resurrect a dissolved shell and used it to shut off an HOA like a valve. Maybe that feels like fighting fire with gasoline. Or maybe it feels like the only language a bully hears is paper with a seal. You know what I mean? And I'm not here to tell you what to think about HOAs or power or neighbors. I'm here to say the smell of wet ash sticks, and that paper either checks power or it blesses it. Tell me where you land. Did I do the right thing flipping their leverage back on them? Or did I cross a line that should make all of us nervous about what one determined person can do with patience and a filing fee? Drop your take in the comments, argue it out. Tell me what you've seen on your street. Fair boards, bullies with clipboards, quiet folks who finally had enough. And if you believe nobody should have the power to erase a home over a bill smaller than a set of tires, hit subscribe. So this story rides a little farther than the ashes at Birch Hollow Lake.